just to kind of connect it off to what Storm said last night, and I'm glad that I had told Storm that probably that 75% of the people who were here yesterday would be attending last night, and that's about how it was. And we did have a number of people who are not registered for the symposium that did come last night. Because you just never know who's going to walk in off the street. But I think in terms of setting the theme for today, you know, this is what I've learned from knowing the Storm for a year now, up to now by emails and phone calls, and now we're real people, right? But this is a pretty powerful statement on Storm's part, which is decrease our destructive footprint while at the same time increasing our restorative footprint. Just kind of think about that. And those who were here last night, you saw the examples of where it's happening. And another way to look at that is, you know, we have this old saying, the flip side of a problem is an opportunity, right? It's as simple as that, isn't it, Storm? But I like to read this quote because this quote is one of those quotes I caught in one of my phone conversations with Storm because, you know, I was scribbling madly and getting him talking, and when Storm said, the goal of making the world less worse does not go far enough. Rather, we have it within our power to undo previous damage and make the world better. And you've just got to believe that. And looking at Bill Derry at the back there, yesterday's keynote, we talked about how we felt in the 70s when we were young, right? When we really believed we could change things. And, you know, the way I look at it is, yes, we have our ups and downs, but the trend line is up, right? You've got to look at the trend line. So the process of restoring our planet and revitalizing our communities is becoming a rigorous discipline with the proper education and tools. I mean, that's what we've really been trying to do the last 15, 20 years is develop the tools and educate. I just want to reflect a bit more, again, on some of what I heard yesterday and thinking about what Storm said last night and thinking about a couple of experiences I've had in recent years to kind of help put things in context for the people here. In 2015, March of 2015, I was invited to Vermont by Senator Patrick Leahy, or Leahy, this is how you say it in the States, the senior Democratic senator, because he was having his second environmental summit in Burlington. And they asked me to come down, and they had a spot in the program for me called Inspirational Speech. And, you know, I did my thing, did my research. I figured out that, you know, in terms of the analogy between Vermont and British Columbia, because I said, British Columbia is pretty big, but they said, what it turned out to be that Vancouver Island and Vermont are pretty comparable. Population, length, all that kind of stuff. And you know, the dimensions of Lake Champlain, their big water body, they pretty well match the Sailor Seas. So I found a way to kind of make the comparison to them. But there's two things about that experience. One was the, no, they don't call them ministers, they call them, what is it, secretaries of, what's it in the government, in the state government. They're not, we call them ministers. Oh, not the governor, but what's the equivalent of a minister? State secretary? Whatever. The equivalent of a minister. I remember this because she was a minister of transportation up here. That would be the equivalent. And so they told us that we only had, they wanted us to speak for 10 minutes each. And we're waiting for it to be introduced, and she said, I'm going to take more than 10 minutes. And I said, well, if you take more than 10 minutes, so am I. And so we did. But it was worthwhile because what I learned from her presentation was that my aha as she talked was realizing in British Columbia, one of the things that made us a little bit different, not that we're better people, but we had a crisis happen about a decade sooner. 2003. When I say 2003, what does everybody remember in terms of what was on the news every night? If I give you another clue called Kelowna. Kelowna was on fire. The evacuation of 30,000 people. And it wasn't just Kelowna, it was the fact that everything hit us that year, right? We had the drought, we had the spectacular forest fires, the mass evacuations, followed by the floods in the winter, and we had Pine Beetle exploded, right? So we had the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So that was our context. But that was our galvanizing moment, because in terms of the partnership for water sustainability, well, we're the stewards of the Water Sustainability Action Plan for British Columbia. The action plan would not have happened without 2003. So that was my aha, because they had their hurricane, or what it was, in 2011, and we were 2003, and I said, that's it. We just got a 10-year head start here, because we had all the natural disasters happening at once. So that was profound. And then at the end of that day, I was sitting around talking to all the organizers about, well, so why did you ask me to come? What is it about British Columbia that got your attention? And they said, well, when we looked around North America, British Columbia is the place where things are happening. That there's something happening in British Columbia. And we wanted to learn firsthand about it. So I think the message there is that sometimes when you're too close to it, you don't appreciate the good work you're doing. That people from outside see it. And I think a big part of maybe how we've helped get the story out is our waterbucket.ca website. Because when it was launched in 2005, and it was launched by an announcement from the minister, our mantra was we were going to document our story and record our history as we created it. So I think the people who do their research go there and they start to get the flavor of what's been developing over the last 15 years in British Columbia, and that gives them the insight. So that's the one aspect, one story I'd like to share with you. I have shared with you. I'd also like to reflect on my experience in 2016 doing the keynote in Australia. Because, you're always trying to find that balance in terms of what to tell them about what we're doing, and, everybody thinks we're a rainforest, and I'm going down there and I'm thinking, well, they just come out of a 7-year drought, and, we're just, we just had our 5-month drought, and thinking, well, 5 months drought's not a big deal when you have a 7-year drought. But what I realized, my aha was, no, when you got a 7-year drought, you've got time to respond. When you're in a drought, whether it's going to be 3 months or 4 months or 5 months, if you make the wrong decision in month 2 or 3, you're in trouble. And that's what happened in 2015. Because, what I say? Because in certain jurisdictions, there were people who were now in control of the system, managing a system, who had not had the prior experience of managing during a drought. And so there was decisions weren't made fast enough in some cases, and then there was an overreaction. But it all kind of worked out, right? But it was just a reminder that, when you're talking about a 6-month drought, we can't make it through. And if we're three or 4 months into a drought, like when the media phoned me up and said, well, what's the solution? What do you do when you're in a drought? Well, use less water, because you're not going to be creating any more water. So that was my aha. In British Columbia, we're very vulnerable, because if we have an extreme situation, we don't have the time to get it wrong, right? That was one aspect. The other, now I forgot my point. The other part in terms of the aha in Australia was realizing not just the significance of a short term for them, drought being big news here, but I forgot what I was going to say. I had it. I'll move on. Part of what I want to say about in terms of building the connections between the 2 days was, yesterday we tried to introduce you to a whole system way of thinking. We hope that some of that stuck. The key message was refocus or focus on how to reconnect hydrology and ecology. And we can do that through restorative development. One of my themes would be, and having, when you go to lots of redevelopment places around, communities around the world, they look really great, but if they really address the fundamentals underneath of how water gets to the stream, because, you can have a lot of nice looking stuff, but if you haven't addressed the root causes, the problems are going to still be there. So I'm going to introduce some new lingo to you. Value of the water balance services provided by nature. Value of the water balance services by nature. Keep that thought in mind. I'm going to introduce you to another phrase, the package of ecological services. And I saw Marvin just over there somewhere. Where are you, Marvin? I saw you, right? Marvin Commands of the town of Comox coined this term, package of ecological services. You're going to hear a bit more about later on. Ian Tim Pringle kind of came up with that. And as Marvin said, to describe the many advantages the community expects to receive from a creek shed now and in the future. We'll learn more from Marvin. More new lingo. A couple years ago when we had Finn Donnelly on part of our Blue Ecology workshop, so in addition to being a federal member of Parliament, as everybody knows, you do all know that Finn swam the Fraser River twice from top to bottom, don't you? Who does not know that? Oh no, positive question. Does everyone, who knows that Finn Donnelly swam the Fraser from top to bottom? Half the audience? Okay. But that's not what I wanted to emphasize. Finn has said we need to change our language in terms of how we describe things. And so he's the one who actually coined the term creekshed to make this distinction between a river basin, the highest order, a river shed being the river tributary, and then the creekshed. Because the creekshed, by definition, is a small watershed that is local in scale, such that residents can relate to it. Right? It's Shelley Creek, it's not Shelley River, so why do we call it, or Shelley Water? So why call it the Shelley River Shed? It's a Shelley Creek shed. New lingo. Of course, Wally Wells is in the audience with Asset Management BC. You've got Manny Machado, Tana Gibson's. These are the champions of this kind of thinking. Creek sheds as infrastructure assets. Because in terms of local government, you got to talk the lingo. So if you can reframe things as an infrastructure asset, assets to be protected. So it's, in terms of the whole system water balance lens, watersheds are integrated systems. Isn't that what Sylvia and Neil were talking about yesterday? It's one, and Jill's Wendling, it's one water. We talked just about the three pathways by which rainfall reaches streams. Well, think of each of those pathways as the asset. And those three pathways provide the water balance services. So it's simple language maybe, but there's a huge amount of thinking behind understanding how the system is working. More introduction to new lingo. So very, very busy in a sense graphic, but it's really quite simple. Living Water Smart, BC's water plan, 2008. So it's 11 years now. It was more than a document. As I remember saying to Lynn Cry-Woken, who was the provincial lead for developing and rolling it out, Living Water Smart is an idea. And I think it's an idea that's transcended governments, because premiers have changed, governments have changed, but we're still driven by Living Water Smart. And the Living Water Smart document is a nice coffee table book, but that's the way you tell the story. And under that umbrella of Living Water Smart, everything we've done since 2008 is being framed under that umbrella of Living Water Smart. And in terms of the language we've been working on, is sustainable creekshed systems through asset management. Because I've been around long enough to know that just having the high-fluting language does not cut it. All of that always does come back to money, so it's a matter of how we redefine money. And I mentioned that yesterday in terms of level of service, all that kind of stuff. And we talked about the twin pillars, the water balance methodology. That was the key to the guidebook. And Peter Law did bring a copy of the guidebook because he said a number of people have been asking about it. So at our table over there, I have a copy of the guidebook. If anybody wants to wander over and flip it, because in 2002 it was transformational, and it's standing the test of time. And rather than having a static document, we build on it. It's our foundation. Everything we do is building on it, adding depth. But one of the things we've realized in the last couple of years is you've got to distinguish between viewing through the technical lens, that's the water balance methodology in the guidebook, and viewing through a social lens. And you're going to hear more later on from Tim Pringle on the ecological accounting process. And another soundbite to keep in your mind, hydrology is the engine that powers ecological services. Hydrology is the engine that powers ecological services. And did you know that looking through the worth lens leads to a fundamental shift in philosophy regarding how to value natural assets? Well, later on this afternoon with Marvin and the gang from the Comox Valley, you'll learn more about that. And so just to finish with one more quote. Yesterday, Bill Derry used this image of Ian McCarg, kind of that 50-year perspective, and I really do urge people who have never heard of McCarg or Design with Nature to take the time. And I found that in the second edition, the 25 years anniversary edition was really quite powerful because McCarg is a long-winded introduction, but he described the situation preceding writing the book and how hopeless it seemed in the 1960s, and after 25 years, what the changes he was seeing. And the very last part of this introduction, he said, the title, Design with Nature, the title contains a gradient of meaning. It can be interpreted as simply descriptive of a planning method, deferential to places and peoples. It can invoke the grand design. It can emphasize the conjunction with, and finally, it can be read as an imperative. Design with Nature. Richard.